Hello and welcome back to ArxangelRC. I am Nicola and today I will be talking about the new XUAV Clouds FPV plane. Sadly, I will not be able to show you any OSD data with impressive distances and flight times because my OSD burned out that morning, and since I was already at the field when it happened, there was no way to change it. But since it was still letting the video go through, I ran with it, though it did cause a lot of interference in the video, which really limited the distance I was able to safely go with this plane. But enough about that. Let's talk about the plane a little. I really wasn't sure how it will fly because I thought the body is way too short for the wingspan, just under 1 meter for the body and almost 1.9 meters for the wings. For comparison, the new MyFly Dream Nimbus has a body of 1.3 meters and a wingspan of 1.8 meters, so the proportion looks a bit better there. But to my surprise, the Clouds flew absolutely perfectly, although it was a bit sensitive on the pitch axis in manual mode because of that short body. But once I switched to a stabilized mode, it was absolutely perfect. On this plane, I will also be testing another new product, the VTX03 switchable output video transmitter. My god, that's a mouthful. The unit is super light, around 3 grams, and since I was generally going for micro and mini components for this build, I thought that would fit right in. I had it set up for 200 milliwatts just to be sure it will give me a good distance. I also replaced the stock linear antenna with an FSky antenna extension cable and mounted a CP antenna on it. A word of warning on this unit: even at 25 milliwatts, it does get hot. At 200 milliwatts at room temperature, you can see how fast the temperature is rising, and I have seen it go up to 78 degrees. So be sure you use the option to switch output power off if you're going to do plenty of pre-flight checks, and only turn it back on just before you're ready to fly. Of course, that doesn't matter for racing drones, where I suppose this will be more popular than for long-range airplanes, but let's see what this is capable of. And one last thing, read the manual. It's very useful. And now we finally get to the flying bit. I was a bit nervous about the takeoff, but there you have it. Perfect and almost vertical. The thing is that using micro components really paid off, or it must have, because the plane weighs exactly 2,552 grams with everything on board, including the 6S 6.6 amp battery. And based on experience, I would say that the two Racer Star 3508 motors have well over 3 kilograms of combined thrust. For comparison, back in the day I used to fly my FPV Raptor V2 at 2.5 kilograms with a single motor that had no more than 1.5 kilograms of thrust, so I had to use a bungee to launch the plane, but it was very efficient. The same battery pack was enough to last a 90-minute flight. So back to the Clouds. Once in the air, the plane was a dream come true. Even though there was some wind, I didn't need to trim anything. It just flew perfectly. It was very nimble for a plane that size. It could go fast, it could go slow. And speaking of slow, this flight didn't go without my stall testing. And I was really surprised by the stall performance. It was exemplary. With throttle set to 0 and an up elevator, the plane was doing pretty great. There would be some rocking from side to side, of course, and then maybe a slight dip at some point. But it would recover almost instantaneously, which makes this a very good machine to fly slowly, and I know a lot of people want to do that. And keep in mind, this is in full manual mode. Once I switched to one of the stabilized modes, things got even better with the stall. Zero throttle and full up elevator resulted in a very gentle and controlled parachuting down with pretty much no instability. I think at some point I saw the speed as low as 5 or 6 meters per second, although I was going against the wind. You should also keep in mind that this plane is quite light at this point, so if you load it up more, it may have different flight characteristics, like a higher stall speed, for instance. So I really had a great time flying this plane, but just look at it from the top. The body does look a bit too short for the wingspan. Luckily, that doesn't seem to have a bad effect on the flight characteristics. It didn't do so on the Talon. At least not at the weight of 2.5 kilograms. I actually let the plane do an auto mission and went chasing after it with my Phantom, but because this was only the first flight, I wasn't sure how slow it could actually go, so I didn't program too slow a speed, and consequently the Phantom did have trouble catching up to it. But I will do more tests next time, and hopefully I will be able to get some better aerial footage of the clouds. Also, I don't know if you can notice this, but the plane does go up and down a lot during the chase, and that is probably because of the barometer. I have some foam over it, and the autopilot is mounted in a compartment with no direct access to the outside of the plane, so I'm guessing some error is occurring there and making the plane do that. We'll deal with it soon enough. And now let's move to the impressive stuff. Since I wanted to simplify this build, I decided not to go with the Arling system for long-range control, but rather to finally test out the FSky L9R long-range receiver. As funny as it may sound, up until now I had only used one of these on a copter that I usually flew no more than 100 meters away from me, so I decided to stop wasting the receiver's potential and put it in a suitable model. Hence the Clouds is now equipped with it. Over the past years I've read reports of different distances achieved with it, but I wasn't really sure what to expect. I've been able to achieve over 6 kilometers with a simple D4R2 receiver with its stock antennas, and for those of you more familiar with racing drones, you know this one is used there a lot for close range models. So my thinking was the L9R will either smash this distance into the ground or it will fail miserably for some reason. At the start of the video I did mention that I did not have a working OSD and that the burned out one was introducing some interference into the video signal, and this is what this looks like on the ground. This recording is not from the second flight because the battery in my DVR died and I had no way of recording it, but you get the idea. Now, some of you may think you have to be crazy to go flying long range without a working DVR, and even worse, without an OSD. If something goes wrong, you wouldn't even know where to go look for the plane. Well, that is true, but to some extent. I did have my antenna tracker working and I had it connected via Bluetooth to my phone. So in addition to tracking the plane, the tracker was sending those GPS coordinates to my phone and it was plotting them on a map for me, allowing me to track the plane in real time. So it wasn't all that bad. Furthermore, I did make sure that my return to home function was working properly and that the plane could come back if I lost signal. So somewhere around this point I was already 6 kilometers away from me and about 1.5 kilometers high. You have to agree that a plane called Clouds would be wasted flying close to the ground and away from those clouds. Hence, in my desire to put the two together, you get this flight. The only problem was, by the time I managed to get this flight going, the clouds had gone pretty high up and they were even close to the ground in the morning, but I was busy flying other models at that time. Nevertheless, I did try to reach them, but another problem was that the video on the ground was horrible, and not because the video transmitter was weak. Actually, the signal itself was very good with no dropouts, but the bloody OSD was putting too much interference, and at that distance it was degrading the picture quality even more, to the point where I could only make out shapes and the darker color of the ground. So I wasn't really sure where I was going or how far away the clouds were. In any case, the clouds must have been around 3 kilometers up, but I only made it up to 2.3 kilometers before turning back, because with the lack of an OSD data, I had no way of knowing what voltage my battery was at. So after reaching about 6.5 kilometers out and 2.3 kilometers up, I decided to head back. Since I didn't have any idea where I was, I let the autopilot do all the pointing and engaged return to home. It is interesting to know that at no point during this flight did I lose signal with the plane. The L9R performed absolutely flawlessly. I did have a funny moment where I tried to control the plane and switch it out of return to home while my Taranis was turned off, because this is how I engage return to home, It took me some time flipping switches and moving sticks to remember to look down and see that the radio was off. The moment I switched it back on, I regained control and was able to fly the plane back almost by myself. I also need to mention that this plane glides very well, much better than the Eve 2000, possibly because it is about 1.7 kilograms lighter than the Eve and a wingspan smaller only by about 30 centimeters. I was able to make it all the way back to the airfield with no throttle while I was going down, and also to make it back down 2.3 kilometers in 6.5 kilometers distance. I had to keep the nose pointed down at all times. Otherwise, I guess I would have overshot the landing spot by another 6 kilometers if I just let it glide down without interfering. Now, speed-wise, the plane is also quite versatile. While testing the stall, I was able to determine that at the right weight and conditions, it could slow down considerably. But what I also discovered on the way up during the second flight and on the way down is that it is also capable of moving around quite quickly. On the way up, the tracker was reporting speeds of around 120 kilometers an hour. Of course, I was going downwind, but still, this is quite the speed for a piece of foam with a micro flight controller in it, and still it came back home intact. So, final thoughts on this plane. It is simply great. Apart from the shorter looking body in relation to the wingspan, there is really nothing bad that I can say about the clouds. The build was definitely quicker and easier than the Eve 2000. The layout inside the fuselage and the wings is nicely thought out, and there are lots of conveniences for wiring and installing electronics. And with the right combination of motors, batteries and gear, it makes an impressive performer once it's in the air. Despite the windy weather that day, it did fly pretty stable, and I even think very little PID tuning will be necessary for the autopilot. Those flights were under stock PIDs, and at no point did I think that it is lacking something and I will need to tune it. My overall experience with the XUAV clouds has been nothing but positive so far, and I hope it will stay that way. Next time I will do some mods and improvements on my video system so I don't suffer the same issues as this day, and I'm also thinking of adding a printed pan tilt mount on the nose for the run cam so I can take a look around when I need to. Also, be sure that first chance I get, I will put the clouds into the clouds. It is now time to conclude this review. If you like the model, you can find the purchase link in the description below, and if you want to see the whole build, you can do so by following the link to my blog, arxangel.blogspot.com, where you can also find a lot more interesting reviews. If you want to see more of my videos, you can visit my YouTube channel, and if you would like to see more of my reviews in the future, please don't hesitate to subscribe if you haven't already. That is all from me for now, and I will see you later and into the clouds.